The Forgotten Village. One foggy evening, Michael, a passionate traveling photographer, decided to explore the hidden corners of the world. After hours of searching through maps, he stumbled upon a village that seemed to be missing from all modern maps. It was called Ravendale. Intrigued by its isolation, he made up his mind to visit it. The village was located deep in a valley, surrounded by dense forests. Michael's GPS stopped working once he entered the area, and he had no choice but to rely on his instincts. The road narrowed, trees crowded in, and the air grew thick with an eerie quiet. When he finally reached the village, it looked like something out of a different time: simple cottages, cobblestone streets, and a lingering sense of antiquity. As he entered Ravendale, he noticed the villagers were all dressed in old-fashioned clothes, their eyes watchful, yet oddly distant. They greeted him with polite nods, but their expressions were cold. A few elderly women with white hair whispered among themselves, and children watched from behind the windows, not playing, but staring at him. "Welcome to Ravendale," an old man with a white beard said. "You must be lost. You've wandered far." I'm not sure how I got here," Michael admitted, still feeling the strange pull of the village. "I was just following the road." "Yes," the old man nodded knowingly. "It's easy to lose your way. This place has a habit of keeping people curious." Michael decided to stay the night. The innkeeper, a middle-aged woman, led him to a small room above the inn. She handed him a key and gave him a peculiar warning. "Don't wander past the edge of the village at night. The woods are not safe." That evening, Michael tried to blend in with the villagers. He wandered the village, taking photographs of the eerie tranquility. There were no shops or markets, only the village square, which was empty except for a few stone benches. As the sun began to set, he noticed that the villagers all gathered at a small church at the center of the square, each carrying a candle. Confused, Michael asked a young woman who was walking beside him, "What's going on? Why are they carrying candles?" The woman's face became rigid, and she avoided his gaze. "It's tradition," she whispered before quickly walking away. As the night fell, the church bell tolled. Michael, feeling an odd sense of curiosity, decided to follow the villagers into the church. The doors creaked open, and he stepped inside. The air was cold, and the room smelled faintly of incense. The villagers were kneeling before an altar, murmuring quietly. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the back of the church. Michael turned, startled, and saw a shadowy figure standing near the entrance, draped in black. The figure began chanting in an unknown language, and the villagers continued their prayers, their voices growing louder, as though in a trance. Unsure of what was happening, Michael backed out of the church, but the door slammed shut behind him. He turned around and realized the entire village square was now surrounded by an unnatural fog. He could barely see the cottages, let alone the distant forest. Everything seemed to be closing in. Panicking, he ran down the narrow streets, searching for a way out. But every turn he took led him deeper into the fog, and the village seemed to stretch endlessly. The streetlights flickered and dimmed, casting long shadows that seemed to follow him. It wasn't until he stumbled upon the village's cemetery that he realized something was terribly wrong. The tombstones were old, and the names on them were of villagers who had disappeared over the centuries. One gravestone, however, caught his attention. It was dated only a year ago. The name was familiar: Michael Price. His heart raced. This couldn't be possible. He had never visited Ravendale before. Had he been here before in a past life? Was this a premonition? Or was he slowly losing his mind? Suddenly, the fog parted just enough for him to see a figure standing at the edge of the village, the same dark figure he had seen in the church. It was slowly walking toward him. Michael tried to scream, but his throat felt tight, like invisible hands were choking him. The figure stopped in front of him and removed its hood. To Michael's horror, the figure's face was a reflection of his own. "You should have never come here," the figure whispered. "The village claims all who enter. You will never leave." Before Michael could respond, the ground beneath him trembled, and the entire village began to dissolve into mist, like a nightmare fading away. He tried to run, but his feet were frozen in place, and the fog closed in around him. When the fog lifted the next morning, Michael's camera was found in the village square, its lens cracked. There were no signs of the village or its people. The only thing left was the whisper of the wind and the name Ravendale, which no one remembered a days past, but Michael's experience in Ravendale lingered in his mind. The feeling of being trapped in a forgotten place, the eerie fog, and the dark figure that resembled him, he couldn't shake the terrifying memories. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't forget the name on the gravestone, Michael Price. He couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that he had somehow become part of the village's twisted history. Determined to get to the bottom of what had happened, Michael returned to the village, this time with a new resolve. Armed with a map, extra equipment, and a sense of dread in his gut, he set out again to find Ravendale. He couldn't remember how he had gotten there the first time, his GPS had failed him, and the roads led him nowhere. But this time, he knew he had to find answers. He followed the same path he had taken before, the fog thicker this time, the trees pressing in as though they were alive. It felt like the woods were alive with whispers, as though something was watching him. The road grew narrower and more twisted, and before long, he realized he had lost his way. But then, like before, a faint light appeared in the distance, Ravendale. He stepped into the village with a mixture of dread and fascination. It looked the same, but there was something different about it this time. The air felt colder, and the village square was emptier than he remembered. The villagers still wore the same old-fashioned clothes, their eyes watching him with an unblinking stare. But this time, there was no welcoming. They didn't acknowledge his presence at all. Michael felt the weight of the village pressing in on him. The streets were silent, the only sound the soft echo of his footsteps against the cobblestone. The village, once lively in its own strange way, now felt like a hollow shell. He tried to find the inn, but it wasn't where it should have been. In its place was a dilapidated building, abandoned and overgrown with ivy. Confused, Michael ventured further into the village, looking for someone who might recognize him, someone who could explain what was happening. As he walked, he noticed that the cemetery was now at the edge of the village, surrounded by a high iron fence, something that hadn't been there before. He pushed open the rusted gates and stepped into the cemetery. The graves were old, weathered, and many were marked with names he couldn't read. His heart pounded in his chest as he made his way to the back of the cemetery, where he found something new, an unmarked grave with a fresh mound of dirt. Michael dropped to his knees, his fingers brushing the earth. The dirt was still soft. And then, something caught his eye. It was a small object sticking out from the dirt. He dug it out, and his hands trembled as he uncovered an old photograph. It was a picture of him, standing in the village square, smiling. He had never taken this photo. As he held the picture, the air around him grew colder, and a voice echoed from behind him. "You shouldn't have returned." Michael spun around, his heart racing. The dark figure, the same one from his previous visit, stood in front of him once again. This time, its face was more defined. He could see the deep, hollow eyes and the twisted smile. The figure stepped closer, its presence suffocating. "You've already been claimed," it whispered. "The village doesn't forget. And neither will you." Michael tried to run, but his feet wouldn't move. It was as if the ground itself was holding him in place. The figure's shadow stretched out, and before he could scream, the world around him began to distort. The village, the fog, the dark figure, they all started to dissolve into a cold, empty void. Michael felt as though he were falling into darkness, the echoes of the village's forgotten history ringing in his ears. But just before everything went black, he saw it, his name etched into a gravestone in the cemetery. Michael awoke with a sharp gasp, his breath ragged as though he had been drowning. His eyes snapped open, but all he saw was darkness. For a moment, he thought he was still trapped in the void, but then he realized he was lying on cold, damp ground. His body ached, as if he had been tossed around, and his head throbbed with an unbearable pressure. Panic set in. He scrambled to his feet, his hands trembling as he pushed himself upright. The air was thick, suffocating, and the smell of wet earth filled his nostrils. He reached for his camera, but it was gone. He couldn't find it anywhere. There was no village, no cemetery, no dark figure, just endless darkness. He took a few unsteady steps forward, his heart pounding in his chest. A distant light flickered on the horizon, an unmistakable sign that there was something out there. Desperate, Michael began moving toward it, his feet stumbling over the uneven ground. The air grew colder, and the silence pressed down on him like a heavy weight. As he drew closer to the light, he saw a figure in the distance. It was a woman, standing motionless beneath a flickering street lamp. Her face was hidden in the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat, but her long, flowing dress swayed as though there were an invisible breeze. "Are you real?" Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman didn't answer. She simply stood there, her head slightly tilted, as if waiting for him to approach. There was something about her, something unsettling, but Michael, driven by an overwhelming sense of fear and curiosity, moved toward her. As he got closer, he noticed that the street around them was empty. No houses, no trees, just a long, desolate road stretching into the black void. The only sign of life was the woman. "Who are you?" Michael demanded. "What happened to the village? Where is everyone?" The woman raised her head slowly, revealing her pale face and eyes that were as black as coal, empty, hollow, and endless. Michael's blood froze as he stared into them. "You've been here before," she said softly, her voice carrying an eerie resonance. "The village claims all who enter, and you are no exception." Michael recoiled, his heart pounding louder than ever. "No. I can't be. I've never—" "You've been here before," she interrupted, her voice growing colder. "You've always been here. This is your fate." He stepped back, stumbling in disbelief. "No. I'm not part of this. I don't belong here." His voice cracked with desperation. "I'm just a photographer. I don't even know how I got here." The woman's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't a reassuring one. It was a smile full of sorrow, as though she knew the truth and had resigned herself to it. "Everyone who finds Ravendale is drawn into it," she said, her tone grave. "The village is not a place, it's a curse. And once you're in, you can never leave. The village doesn't let you go. It traps you, repeats your life over and over, until you forget what is real and what is not." Michael's breath caught in his throat. The woman's words rang in his mind like 1,000 bells. Was he really trapped? Was he repeating the same cycle over and over? His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden crash from behind him. He spun around, his heart skipping a beat as the fog rolled in, thick and unnatural. A shadow emerged from the mist, tall, dark, and impossibly familiar. It was the same figure again, the dark figure with its hollow eyes and twisted smile. "You never should have returned," the figure growled, its voice a low, guttural whisper. "You were always meant to be one of us." The woman reached out to touch Michael's arm, and her cold fingers sent a shiver down his spine. "They all come. They all think they can escape. But once the village claims you, there is no escaping. You are part of its curse, now." Michael felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. His chest tightened, and his mind raced. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't make sense of what was happening. Was this a nightmare? A hallucination? Or had he truly entered a place where time and reality no longer mattered? Suddenly, the fog thickened, and the world around him began to blur. The village, the woman, the figure, they all started to fade, just like the memory of Ravendale had faded when he first tried to leave. But now, the fading felt different.